Hello, friends, and welcome into the Marriage Talk podcast. It is good to have you with us. Thank you for subscribing. And in case you didn't know, you can also watch today's conversation unfold on the Marriage Talk YouTube channel. And we hope that you'll share the link to either the audio or the video or both with somebody in your world that you know would benefit from some insight and guidance in their marriage. Bill Hobson here, along with Jay and Laura LaFoon. And you can find out more information about their world of ministry at jayandlaura.com. It is summertime. What's been the highlight of your summer to this point as we talk now in the earlier days of July?
The highlight of our summer would probably be Father's Day weekend.
Yeah.
Got to play golf with my son, spend it with the granddaughters, and
I got to take the granddaughters shopping. Now they're only 4 and 2. So that was a great experience. And grandma spent way more money than she meant to.
Train up a child and they
and honestly, we're pretty simple people. One of the best parts of summer here in Michigan is the farmers market, baby. Fresh fruits and vegetables. Can't beat it.
Yeah, we have a really nice one about 15 minutes north of us where they've got obviously fruits and vegetables, but they have food trucks and they have fish and they have cheese. And yeah, so it's every Thursday we head up to Mount Pleasant, Michigan. And
I would say the best thing that's happened to me this summer is called our back porch. We spend almost every night on our back porch, just enjoying the beautiful evenings, reading, having some iced tea, and being outside. That is just
because we know in a couple of months the snow will come and the cold will come and we will be indoors.
Laura, we do not have an explicit language warning on this podcast for a reason, and you just used the S word.
Snow.
Oh, snow. I was like, I did?
No cursing, Laura.
Did I just swear? I don't remember. Oh yeah, snow. That is, yeah. I'll give you that.
Well, the older we get, the more we understand why people go south after the holiday season, and they don't come back till Easter. Smart.
Begins to look more and more appealing the older that we get. I'm also reminded of those special moments that sometimes don't require a road trip. In fact, in my life, I kind of prefer that they don't require a road trip because I'm on the road quite a bit. So just, got home a couple days ago from a lot of driving, and I just went out and sat on the back patio with I think my iPad. I was watching something and just sat outside without anything I had to do, even though the long grass was staring at me. That night, I decided I don't have anything I have to do, and just kind of taking a deep breath, which we need to recharge. We've got to kind of make sure that our engine is fully fueled, which is a very clumsy segue into talking about an advertising campaign. I told you it was very clumsy. I'm willing to admit that. Years ago, there was a slogan, an advertising slogan for Lexus, which was the relentless pursuit of perfection. Now, I actually thought that slogan was a lot more recent than it turned out to be.
40 years ago.
Hey, their marketing department did a great job because it's still implanted in my mind, even though I've never bought a Lexus. The relentless pursuit of perfection. That concept is kind of where we are headed here today as we talk about our marriage relationships, because we know we're not perfect, but we also know that we've got to have this pursuit so that we can continue to improve. And what was the Apostle Paul say? Be perfect like I'm perfect. I'm like, well, or like Christ is perfect. I'm like, well, I can't do that, but I can try to do that, I guess, is the way that I would summarize it. So how does all of this overlay with our marriage conversations?
Now, perfect is a funny word because, I've always heard there's no perfection in this life, so that you'll never reach perfection until, you get to heaven with Jesus, and you can't expect perfection out of your spouse. But the perfection that we're talking about here is the fact that God has brought you two together. You are the perfect mate for each other. That's kind of where we're headed.
And I'm sticking with what she just said.
He's not disagreeing with me, which is a good thing.
No, if you think about it, we all have these ideals of what, the ideal woman, the ideal man, the ideal relationship, the ideal meal, all these things that go through our mind, and we set our expectations on what is the fantasy in our brain, as opposed to what's real life, real expectations for another human being that I am married to. We don't marry Jesus Jr., so we can't expect perfection. We married a flawed human being, even though we love them, even though we think the world of them, even though there's no one we would rather be with. They're flawed, and they will disappoint. They will let us down. They will hurt our feelings. All of these things.
Yeah.
But it's the idea
Yeah.
of progressing in that relationship to pursue perfection.
Well,
even though we know we'll never attain it.
and that you are the perfect mate for each. I'll go back to Genesis in the very beginning when God created Adam and Eve. You don't read in the Bible, because I don't think it happened, that Adam looked at God and looked at Eve and said, "Are you sure she's for me? I mean, could you make her a little more like this or a little less like this?" And Eve didn't do that either and say, "God, are you?" No, they knew, because God created them for each other, that they were the perfect mate for each other. They didn't question. Yes, our spouses are imperfect because they're human, but God gave you each other because you are the perfect match for each other.
The perfect gift.
Right.
It really is.
And a gift that keeps on giving.
Gift that keeps on giving.
Well, I love that idea of being the perfect one for your spouse. It doesn't mean that you're perfect. It doesn't mean your
Right.
spouse is perfect. It means that you were perfectly created and brought together. If you have entered into this holy union of marriage, and you have truly done it with a heart for following what God would have as the very best for you, then he has created you to be perfect together, which isn't the same as being perfect,
Perfect.
right? So there's a, like you said, Laura, there's a interesting definition to what
Mhm.
perfect looks like in the marriage context.
Well, and one of my favorite business authors, a guy by the name of Dan Sullivan, talks about focus on progress, not perfection. And are you in your relationship progressing? Are you getting closer? Are you getting better at understanding your spouse? Are you getting better at giving grace to your spouse? As you do these things, first of all, it improves the relationship. Second of all, it it does what it's supposed to do. It makes you more like Christ. I mean, that is the metaphor of marriage, is that it's Christ in the church.
Well, and if we can have this attitude that God created us for each other, that we are perfect for each other, then why would we give up on our marriage? Why would we, when times get tough and challenges come,
Which they will.
why would we say, "You know what? I'm done with you"? Because God gave you each other. He created you for each other. And that if we can just adopt that attitude that says, "You know what? I know God gave me you. Yes, you try my patience. Yes, you disappoint me. Yes, you irritate me."
Laura's favorite word for me is I annoy her. You're so annoying.
But I still know that God gave me you for me. So I'm not gonna,
And not as a
I'm not
punishment.
gonna throw you out. Well, sometimes I wonder. I'm not gonna throw you out because you annoy me. I don't know. I get very frustrated with couples who are like, I think there's something better. There's somebody better out there for me.
Well, and
Whatever
that's,
baggage you have, you're taking into that one too. So
yeah, and
know.
that concept is one that I want to explore a little bit, because while God would have us become more perfect together, the adversary whispers, actually, you'd be a lot better off
Mhm.
with so and so, with somebody else. Our culture is filled with images of perfect. Even though the people appearing in the images may very well just be miserable, they are put forth as being the idea of perfection. The People magazine, 50 sexiest men alive, or whatever it is, they're supposed
They missed me. I can't believe it.
to be 51, Jay. They just didn't go
Missed
quite
it by
far enough.
that much.
So close. Next year in the unabridged version.
There you go.
and that Speedo is going to look fantastic.
Oh boy, let's not go down that road.
There are actually, I use air quotes around reality television shows that are celebrating affairs.
Right.
There was an entire website that was brought down by a data hack. There's a 3-part documentary on Netflix about it right now that literally had as its slogan, speaking of slogans, life is short, have an affair.
Right.
So
Wow.
here that was what they boldly and proudly proclaimed and sold. And by the way, at the time of the demise of the website, if I remember the numbers right, I believe they had 130 million
Mm.
global users on what is ostensibly a site for married people to meet other married people.
Wow.
So we talk about this battle for perfection. My goodness, Satan's doing pretty well. I mean, his strategy meetings are fairly successful because we can see the impact throughout our culture. You were talking earlier about some of the folks that you work with. My guess would be, this is just a guess, that in many cases, the major struggle or source of anxiety or dissension in those relationships is connected somehow to there must be something more perfect somewhere else.
Well, it is in our DNA, and that DNA is traceable all the way back to Adam and Eve. They were convinced that there was something better than what God had provided them, and they were convinced that there was something better than paradise. And so the power of
But who were they convinced by?
Satan, right?
Yeah,
And I think it's the same for us. Not that we listen to Satan, but he's constantly in our ear through the media, through culture, through however you want. He's constantly in our ear and constantly telling us lies. And one of the biggest lies is that there's someone better than your spouse.
And I think the issue is that as Christians, I say this, we don't give Satan enough credit. We don't think that, and I don't mean that in a good way. I mean, we don't realize that passage of scripture that says our struggle is not against flesh and blood. Your struggle is not against your spouse. Our struggle is against the authorities and the powers of this dark world and the evil forces in the heavenly realm. That's what you're battling against. You're not battling each other. And so when you're looking for that perfection in your spouse, what you're doing is the evil forces are saying you want something different. And that's why this word perfection, this word perfect, we want our spouse to be perfect, but our spouse has already been created perfect for us. Not that they're perfect, but God gave us each other in his perfect divine plan.
But here's what happens. Let's say my glasses represent a problem. Okay, they're not a problem, but let's say that they
are. They're filthy.
They're filthy. Anyway, this problem is between Laura and we have issues that we need to resolve. And the problem that happens, I believe, is that we look past the problem and we see our spouse as the problem instead of the real problem. And instead of taking that problem and putting it out in front of us and together looking at it and together coming up with a solution. Oh, there's the problem. That we have this idea that our spouse is the problem. No, it could be communication. It could be your sex life. It could be your kids. It could be job problems. There are problems, many problems, but your spouse is not one of them.
So when you talk with couples who are viewing each other as the problem, I'm sure there are times when that is sort of the case. If somebody has some addiction issues or they have some temperamental things or whatever, maybe there's some scarring from past issues that are still part of that. So how do you start to move past, yeah, but you don't know what she did 6 years ago, or you don't know what we're going through, and you keep saying that we're perfect for each other, but why doesn't anything feel perfect? All right. So there's some very valid counterpoints to be made to this whole concept. And I could almost guarantee that somebody in our listening audience sees the title of The Pursuit of Perfection in Marriage and says, you guys, what are you smoking, even if it's legal in Michigan?
Right. I do think that you've got to have a good filter. And if there is abuse, if there is any kind of substance abuse or physical abuse or verbal abuse in the home, that's not necessarily solvable by a husband and wife. And if you've got that filter that says we can't solve this by ourselves, there is no shame, there is no harm in seeking out a trusted counselor, be it a pastor or a psychologist or a licensed therapist. Don't seek out your friends, because your friends are not going to give it justice, but seek out a third party who can realistically look at your situation and give you guidance in that. For those of you that aren't realizing that life can be really good together, that's what you've got to do. And there's no shame. There's no, in fact, it's beyond, it's the opposite. There's joy, there's relief, there's peace. There's, oh my gosh, we can get through this. And there's hope. And I think that's the biggest thing when you're facing some of those really bad issues that you need hope.
Well, and even like we've said before, we're not saying that your spouse is perfect in no way, shape, or form, because we're human. None of us are perfect, but God brought you together because you're perfect for each other. And so having that attitude keeps you, makes you say, when there are those things that you need help with, you go get help. You don't just quit and give up and think there's something better on the other side of the fence. You work through it. You do the hard work of building your marriage back up. And that's the relentless pursuit of perfection. This marriage is never going to be perfect. Even when we get to heaven, and we're not going to get into that whole theological thing, but we won't be perfect humans, perfect beings until we get to heaven. So there's no perfect marriage, but realizing, just like Adam and Eve, God created them for each other. He created you for each other. And I know there's probably a listener out there saying, well, maybe I married the wrong one. Maybe I didn't choose the one God, the perfect one God chose for me. Well, I think that God is bigger than that. I think God is bigger than the bad choices that you made or the choice that you made. God is using that choice. And again, that just gives you an excuse to say, I'm done. I chose the wrong one. No, God put Adam and Eve together in a divine plan. And I think that's the way he works even today.
There are certainly as many stories as there are humans, right? So the template is not a clean application across the board for everybody who's listening to us, and we're all well aware of that. So if you're listening right now and you're thinking, well, you don't know my story, you're right. Right? And so there are nuances, there are uniquenesses, and there are little twists and turns that come through relationships that maybe the sort of the other chapter that we're not addressing today. Just know that none of what we're talking about is supposed to work for 100% of people, except for the concept, right? God being the healer of a broken relationship, God being the healer and the hope for those who think that there's no healing and no hope available for you. That does apply across the board. Again, you have your own unique intricacies of your relationship, but the truth and the grace and the mercy, the forgiveness and the restoration of God does not have boundaries. And it's open and available to everybody. Jay, as you were kind of summarizing where we were headed today in a note that you sent, you said it's important to be looking for the good and not the bad, the helpful, not the hurtful. You want to explore that a little bit?
It is a matter, it really is a matter of reworking your thought forms. I am not a butterfly collector, but if I were a butterfly collector, I would know where to look, how to look, and what to look for. And the same is true about your marriage. You can easily spot all the things that are wrong with your spouse. I mean, Laura can name the 85 things that are wrong with me right now. She's got a list on her phone. Just kidding. But we find that stuff so easily. But we need to be looking for the good in our spouse. What are the things that our spouse is exceptional at? What are the things that our spouse really, God's gifted them in that area? And it might be something as simple as, well, He picks up his underwear off the floor and puts it in the hamper. Look for something that simple some days, because that's all you're going to find certain days, because everybody has bad days. But we look for the helpful, not the hurtful. And when we look for it, we're going to find it. Whatever we're seeking, we're going to find. And if you're going to seek the best in your spouse, you're going to find the best in your spouse. One great phrase I heard, within your spouse is both royalty and foolishness. And whichever you speak to is what will emerge. And I will repeat that phrase until I die. Within your spouse is royalty and foolishness. Royalty because we're children of the King. Foolishness because we're fallen human beings. Both reside within us. And whichever you speak to, that's what's going to emerge. If Laura keeps telling me, how handsome I am, then I'm going to carry myself different than if she says, boy, you're just an ugly old beat. No. If she tells me how considerate I am, I'm going to be more considerate. If she tells me what a great listener I am, I'm going to listen more. Why? Because that positive feedback of the good things about your spouse is what will draw out more of your spouse.
And because we're fallen humans, we naturally look for the bad. We're naturally looking for the negative. And, that's why that passage of scripture is so important about focusing on the good, the beautiful, the lovely. And that's what we're talking about. Focus on that, get up every morning and say, I'm going to look for the positive today, not only in your day. I just think that's what you should do anyway. I'm going to look for the good in my day, but also looking for the good in your spouse, the beautiful in your spouse, the lovely, the good, how God created them. And it changes your attitude. That's really what we're talking about here, is your attitude. We're not talking about the fact that perfection can be attained this side of heaven. We're talking about an attitude in your marriage that said, we've been created for each other, and let's look for that positive, that good.
And on a side note, do the same thing with your children, for crying out loud. Look for the good in them. I know some kids will never, ever recover from the sting of their parents' words. You're a loser. You're no good. You're never going to amount to anything. And some people, to their deathbed, carry those words in their heart. But look for the good in your spouse. Look for the good in your children. Look for the good in the world, and you're going to find it. Sometimes it's hard to see, but there are days, huh, honey?
Yeah.
That it's just, you got to look for it.
Good words for sure. And again, the idea of the relentless pursuit of perfection includes the word relentless, which means there really aren't any off days in this effort to draw closer to the Lord and to your spouse. And so if at any point along the way you start to encounter some struggles, some difficulties, some questions, doubts, concerns, and all those things, we'd love to hear from you.
Yes.
It can be completely anonymous, or you can reach out directly to Jay and Laura through the website at marriagetalk.org or at jayandlaura.com. And we don't have to make an episode out of your situation, but we'd be happy to help. And that's kind of what they do in their ministries. There's coaching for married couples. And I can't think of a better way to kind of get set on the right pathway towards pursuing perfection. The number one golfer in the world, Scotty Scheffler, has a coach, right? There's no shame in seeking some outside assistance, as Jay was mentioning a moment ago. So it's jayandlaura.com for all that information. And we'll hope that you share the link to this podcast with others in your world. We do want to hear from you. So you can get us at marriagetalk.org. You can find us on Facebook. And one of the things we'd love to do is engage with you even more than we already do, especially during the summer months where, generally speaking, we have a little bit more time on our hands. And the truth is, listener levels go down a little bit in the summertime. Help us change that trend. Share the link to Marriage Talk, and we'll look forward to talking with you again next time.